What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 246. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and of course, joining me on the line, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Brian Wong.
Hey, man, I finally got to get my moto grind on, and I'm straight murdering fools at M15, Marshall.
I'm so jealous. I was down at the Pro Tour all week, and normally we do a bunch of coverage drafts in between our busy work days, but the event site was a little bit far away from the hotel, and there was one night where a bunch of people went to see a movie, and we didn't get to get as many drafts in as normal, so I stored them all up until after the Pro Tour was over, and we did like 3 drafts that last night, and I stayed up till about 5 in the morning, but not ideal circumstances as we're coming off an incredibly hectic 4 or 5 day work week that leaves you feeling a bit empty-souled and shredded. So some of my decks got a little sketchy, but it was fun.
I don't know how you could do that.
Yeah, it was a bad decision, to be honest, but I don't regret it, interestingly. But yeah, so we're going to be talking quite a bit, of course, about M15. We've got a lot more information now, thanks to the Pro Tour itself and thanks to Brian. Just completely taking one for the team and dedicating his whole weekend to drafting M15. Thank you so much, Brian. It
was tough, but
you made it through somehow.
I did. Just
right.
I don't know how I did it.
So, and winning a bunch too. So before we do all that, though, of course, let's talk a minute about CardKingdom.com. They are the sponsors of this podcast, and they are a great website to buy everything you need related to your fine magical hobby. You can find singles, you can find sealed product, you can find supplies and that kind of thing there. You can also, this is one that Brian likes to talk about because he does it occasionally, you can sell your cards, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can actually go on the site, get all those random draft rares that you have piled up because you don't have enough for a standard deck, but at the same time, they're worth something, so you're not going to just like throw them away or whatever. So you can go on to Card Kingdom, look up how much they'll give you for them, put them in a box, send it to them, and if you want, they'll send you a check. But an even awesomer option in many ways is you can trade them in for store credit. And if you do, you don't just get the straight dollar value, you actually get plus 30% on top of it. And you can spend it on whatever you want at CardKingdom.com. You can get singles if you want to fill out a commander deck, if that's your thing, convert those draft wares into hard to get singles for commander. Heck, you can just run it back and get sealed product, right? You can just get a bunch of booster packs so you can have your buddies over and do a draft. That's what I like to do. I know, Brian, you like to, fill holes in your mighty brick wall of grab bag draft ammo.
Yeah, I tweeted that picture out and I got like 50 favorites or whatever, but I have one like bookshelf just stacked to the brim with booster packs. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and and that's another great way that you can sort of keep the cycle going. And we understand Magic's expensive, right? It's not a cheap hobby, and you really have to kind of cut some corners here and there as far as making sure that you keep ahead of the financial aspect so that you can keep playing. And this is just one way to do it. Of course, they ship quickly, they stand by their product, and we love them. CardKingdom.com is where you want to go. Couple of quick things here before we get into our first crack-a-pack of the show. I have one thing to say, and then we'll start the actual stuff. So first things first, the one for one. It's my new podcast. It's an interview podcast where I sit down with interesting people and have a discussion with them about their life or experiences. It is not Magic specific, though I will definitely have Magic people on it. In fact, the first 2 guests have been people that I've met through Magic. The first was John Laux, former co-host of this very show, and the second was Zach Hill. That show went up very recently, and you can find it. You can go to theoneforone.com to find it and listen to it on the site. And you'll also find links for iTunes subscription or just the RSS feed link if you use something other than iTunes to subscribe to podcasts. So they're all there on theoneforone.com. Now that is the number 1, not ONE. So just so you can find it a little easier. And it's also in the same feed that you're listening to this very podcast on if you happen to get the show via a feed, via RSS feed or via iTunes, you'll see that the One for One is popped up in your feed there too. Now the reason I'm doing that is just to help get the show off the ground. I have a good following here on Limited Resources, and this is somewhat similar material as I'm the one doing the show. So I figured, well, I'll put it in the LR feed just so that people can hear the show and decide if they like it or not. But I'm only doing that for the first 3 shows. So this is the second one. After the next episode of the One for One, I won't show up in your LR feed anymore. I figure that's about enough for people to have gotten a taste of it, and then they can decide, well, yeah, I'd like to subscribe to that separately and get all the episodes of it, or I'm not as interested in that other stuff. I'm more just a Magic player, and I just want to hear LR. So that way, I won't bog down your feed with shows that you don't want. So this one is in there, and then the next episode will be. But if you like the show and you want to keep getting it, you should probably go subscribe before I stop putting them in the feed, because they won't be there forever. Also, Zach Hill was awesome, so I highly recommend checking out that show. He's an interesting guy, especially when you get him down in a seat and can actually make him sit still for an hour, which is a bit of a chore.
Yeah, I think Zach Hill is the smartest person I know, and somehow doesn't know how to make a pot of coffee, despite drinking coffee every day of his life.
That's a perfect description of Zach. He's just, that's exactly how he is. So yeah, check out the One for One. Next thing is, we're doing a thing where we maybe answer an email or a listener question at the beginning of the show sometimes, and I've got one here. And this is actually from a friend of mine. It is from my friend Craig Gibson. He is the Pro Tour photographer. So if you ever see any pictures coming out of the Pro Tour from Wizards on their website or in the coverage or anything, he's the one that took them. You can also see him in the background in a lot of the camera shots that we get when he's doing his work, taking pictures of the players in the feature match area or outside. And he's an avid drafter as well. And he asked a question for the show. He said, so let's say you're at a GP or a place, especially where they're doing timed drafts. Mm-hmm. And he says, what do you do with the time in between packs during a time draft? Do you sort your cards? Do you just look at them and try to memorize them? Brian, what do you do during that time?
Yeah, so, first of all, I should just say this is like you would experience this in the top 8 of a PTQ, day 2 of a Grand Prix, at the Pro Tour. And if you're going to be doing one of those things, it really pays off to practice one, yes, if possible. What I do is you have about 45 seconds or a minute in between packs.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I pull the cards to the front that I think that I'm going to play, and I might sort them by colors if I'm not sure which colors I'm going to play yet. But if I just know, okay, I'm just red black, then I'll just pull all the cards forward. And what I might do is start sorting them, at least start sorting the creatures by converted mana cost to help give me a sense of my mana curve, and realize, oh, I'm really short on 2 drops, or oh, I can really afford to fill out this top end a bit, or whatever. See if you need any more removal. Basically, start to figure out what the gaps are in your deck, because in a time draft, you're not allowed to look at your picks except in those windows between pack 1 and pack 2, and between pack 2 and pack 3. So, those are your lone chances to look. And if you haven't really practiced drafting like this, to have the ability to memorize, all the cards you've taken, or at least have the general sense of it, you really need to maximize your time during that window to figure out what you need going forward.
Yeah, one of the, it's a weakness of mine for sure, because I draft on Magic Online so much that I'm used to just being able to see my mana curve and my colors and know how many 2 drops I have and what I'm missing and that kind of stuff for those tough picks that you get sometimes, like in pack 3, where you're like, well, this is another really good 5-drop, but it's also like a reasonable removal spell, right? And you get this sort of thing where you're like, which one do I need more? And if you can't remember, you can really kind of screw up your draft, right? So I know that I read a thing where Reed Duke, who also came from the Magic Online school, he would actually just tape like a piece of paper over his screen so that he couldn't see his picks in between, and then go through and give himself a minute or whatever and do it again. So I think that if you are planning on playing a lot of high level events, you don't want to get blindsided by something simple like this. It's not that hard. Like, you just need to make sure that you do it and just sort of keep a running total on what you've got. You don't need to know everything about your deck. I wouldn't set the bar as high as like just literally knowing every card in your deck and every spot. It's just more keeping like groups, I'm really low on 2 drops, or my mana curve has gotten really high, and I need to start prioritizing low curve options whenever I can. And you can pick that information up as you're sorting through. For me, I try to get it as close to converted mana cost sort as I can. Sometimes you run out of time, but I really find that I can, like, it translates to my head better for my deck build if I can get those cards in converted mana cost order, because then I can figure out where I have holes in my mana curve.
Yep. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, sometimes if your draft is like kind of wacky, you actually don't know what colors you are at the end of pack 1. Or even, in pack 2, you might have switched colors in pack 2, but then it wasn't really working out. You might have to go back and forth or figure that out. So, I mean, you can be really scrambling in that little 1 minute window you have, if that's the case.
Yes.
So one thing that people also ask us is, how do you just remember your picks? And a lot of times what I do is I just work backwards after each pick. So when I'm making my second pick, you want to be like, okay, what was my first pick, right? And then when I'm making my third pick, I'll think back, what was my second pick, what was my first pick? Mm-hmm. Then get to the fourth, go, what was my third, and do that as far as I can. And I can get to, maybe 6, 7 picks in before I have a hard time remembering every single card. But if you just train yourself to kind of like think backwards like that, you'll just have you won't have to do as much during that review period, right? If you can just kind of have the recall of what those cards are, and just, it takes practice like anything else.
Yeah, and I think that the key is just to make yourself do that if that's what you're worried about.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks, Craig, for the question. We appreciate it. Crack a pack time, B?
Yeah, man, I love cracking these M15 packs.
Yeah, these are kind of fun. And, God, I have noticed I have been stumped on packs a lot more often. I mean, it's still early in the format, but still, there's so many more packs where I'm just like, I just don't know which one of these is better. Like, I'm going to take this one. In fact, I actually want to bring that up with you after we do the Crack a Pack, Brian. There's a couple of controversial picks in the at the Pro Tour.
Oh, okay.
So this pack, by the way, is from Kamal. I met him at GP Boston, and he gave me this pack so that we could open it on the show. So thank you, Kamal.
What percentage of the time do you think you've been first picking the rare out of your very first pack?
Not that often. I don't know. Maybe, like, this is obviously a total guess, but maybe like 35%.
That's what I was thinking too. Somebody was speculating that maybe this is a Prince format, but I haven't really found that to be the case.
Yeah, I kind of thought it might be early on, but I think it's very in the middle now. Like, I on the Prince or Pauper scale, I think it's just like pretty much dead center. There's bombs. Like, I had the pleasure to play against a Soul of Theros in one of my drafts on the coverage thing, and that card was ridiculous. Very princely card for sure. But then I've also just been like Sanctified Charge twice in a row and just lost to, a bunch of whatevers.
Yeah. I beat a Soul of Theros, it was so rough though. It's like, man, you have to be like, okay, it's so much work. But I think I bounced it and then countered it and like had to weather the reactivation from the graveyard. It was just like, geez, it's so many hoops just to deal with one card.
Yeah, it in my deck, I was playing black, and I had a Flesh to Dust somewhere in there, and what it did, it basically just like completely warped the entire game around, do I draw my Flesh to Dust or not? Mm-hmm. I didn't.
I'm pretty sure the entire reason they printed Pillar of Light is just so you can have a sideboard answer to these stupid souls.
I know. I think that's true. I like it though. I like a release valve for the rares, for the big strong rares. Nimbus of the Isles is first.
This card has been going as late as 14th, and I don't really get it. 14th? Yeah, I've seen it at 14th online. It's totally fine.
I second picked it.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. I think it's a little bit underrated. I mean, obviously, you just don't want more than maybe 3-ish 5-drops in your deck, but I mean, it's as good as any of the other common 5-drops.
I think so too. It's totally fine. It's a little boring, but it's totally fine.
Sure.
Foundry Street Denizen.
I have not played that card yet.
And I have not either.
I don't think I played against it either. But honestly, I don't think I would be that scared of it. I've been typically building my decks with a fair amount of answers to early creatures, and I think I would shut that thing right down.
I think so too. I mean, I could see it maybe in mono red, but even then, it's not amazing.
No.
Next is Heliod's Pilgrim.
Yeah,
I want to know where you're at on Heliod's Pilgrim.
It's merely okay in any deck unless you have Spectre Ward.
Spectre Ward, yeah.
Or the red Burning Anger or whatever.
Yeah, Burning Anger, yep.
Yeah. I did lose to the Spectre Ward multiple Heliod's Pilgrim deck. Just like
it's hard. Did I?
It's hard to deal with a whole bunch of copies of that thing. So I mean, I think that makes Spectre Ward such an insane first pick first pack is because you can support it with as many Heliod's Pilgrims as you can get your hands on.
Yeah, there's also that 7-drop Boon Weaver Giant or whatever his name
Yeah,
is.
yeah, that's the one. But I probably wouldn't be taking the Pilgrim very highly unless I already had a sweet card to get with it. It's if you're just getting a marked by honor or something of that nature, it's not really that great.
No, it's just okay. I mean, I like a marked by honor, okay, but the it does go down from there. You can get an oppressive raise, or you can get a what's it called, a divine favor, and you can feel pretty bad about it. I mean, those cards aren't cards that you really want to run on their own.
Yeah, I've actually found oppressive raise to be better in M15 than it was in Theros block.
Interesting.
And I think because in Theros block, so many decks were just angling towards building up one awesome creature.
Uh-huh.
And if you were like, make you pay 3 more to attack with it, they're like, okay, I'll kill you with this thing. And you're
Right.
like, dang it. But in M15, there are a lot more activated abilities and just kind of like role playery creatures that really, if you can shut them down long enough that by the time they would want to spend the mana on it, that creature is mostly irrelevant anyway. So I think they're okay. And if you're getting one in your deck just as an off target for your Heliod's Pilgrim, I think that's okay.
All right. And also remember, you can get Inferno Fist and Crust. Like, there's other things you can get with that.
Yeah.
Naturalize.
I have not mained a Naturalize, and I think it could be reasonable just given how many like reasonable artifacts there are. It just doesn't have a ton of upside though.
Yeah. For me, it's in the 24th, 25th card camp for sure. It's close. Like I would say the majority of games I find a target for it, but that's not the threshold. Like, it's not if I can use it 51% of the time, then I play it. The threshold is like 70%, right? I need to find a target for it most games I play, because you have to remember also that just the act of finding a target for it isn't enough. Like, sometimes that still isn't good. Like, what if they go Meteorite, kill your guy? Mm-hmm. You're like, haha, naturalize it. Like, maybe that was good, but it probably wasn't, right? They already got value out of the thing anyway.
Right. Yeah. You also, like, if you're just killing Bronze Sable or something like that, like, that's not really a great reason to put a card in your deck. So yeah, I would really prefer to main deck Naturalize. But if you're really struggling for playables, you can look at that one.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. One thing, by the way, I have not been really struggling for playables in the format. Like, assuming that I've stuck roughly to 2 colors, I found that there's definitely enough cards to play. I've been having a harder time making cuts than filling out the rest of my deck.
Yeah, I've been in the same place. I haven't had to play anything really that stinky.
Yeah, they don't make skill testers quite in the same way they used to.
Oh, I think Ornithopter has something to say about that one.
No, that's a good point. That's true. There's probably more I'm not thinking of. Black Cat.
I hate Black Cat.
Why?
I just really don't like it.
It's fine.
It just feels like if your opponent just like kind of like sits there for a couple turns, doesn't attack, and then plays out their hand, and now you have a stupid Black Cat. Like, yeah. So I
think the decks that you run Black Cat in are pretty happy if that's a result.
I guess it just doesn't feel better to me than Witch's Familiar. Just wait one more turn and play a thing that actually blocks and just kills all those things that'd be attacking anyways.
I do agree with that.
Or just like any kind of 1/30 or 2/3 type creature. I just don't think Black Cat's that great, and only against a deck that just has to attack through the Black Cat. If you know they have to attack through it, then it's okay. But I still don't think it's that great.
I mean, it's never been that great. Right, like let's put it in perspective here. Black Cat's a low power level card; it always has been. But I think it's playable. I've been running it. But I would prefer not to. Yeah. Well, as would I. Meditation Puzzle.
Oh, I lost a Meditation Puzzle.
You did?
It was in the Spectre Ward deck.
Oh God!
And I was like, well, I guess I can race the Spectre Ward, and I got Meditation Puzzled. I played that match incorrectly, though. I'm not going to blame the Meditation Puzzle. Like, I didn't keep up mana with the Nightfire Giant when I knew he had Spectre Ward in his deck, and I just was killing stuff on my turn. It was just like a horrible play because I was not identifying that I was the control in the matchup.
You were trying to clear things out of the way so you could start hitting them?
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm going to kill my opponent faster, but I was the control. Killing the opponent faster was not my priority. My priority was not dying to Spectre Ward, and I just didn't play correctly. So if I just keep my mana up every turn and just kill stuff on his end step and just don't attack as much, I would have been fine. So, I mean, I walked into the meditation puzzle trap, and it was my own darn fault.
Statute of Denial.
I found this card to be a little bit better than I thought it would be, honestly.
You mean it's playable?
Yeah, I think it's... I've been frequently, probably more often than not, my blue decks have had one Statute of Denial. And I looked to side it out against very proactive decks. But against even medium speed or slower decks, I found it to actually be pretty good. And the looting effect on resolution is pretty cool, actually. And if you're pitching a land to maybe get a spell, that's actually a big deal.
For sure. Yeah, I found it okay, too. I've played it in the main deck in 2 different decks and found it super mediocre. Like, I countered something good once. I died because I had it in my hand and they had already curved out. Like, it is exactly what you think. It's a clunky 4-mana counter with a small upside. I prefer not to main it if I can get away with it.
Yeah, I have been usually starting it and just siding it out if their deck is very aggressive.
Yeah, I've been doing the opposite. Side it in if they're slow. Krenko's Enforcer.
I love Krenko's Enforcer.
Krenko's Enforcer is good.
Yeah, both Intimidators in the set, the Accursed Spirit and Krenko's Enforcer, are right at home. Just really happy with either of them.
Yeah, I am too. In fact, I think that's my front runner here. Nimbus of the Isles is a thing too. All right, well, here's a Marked by Honor. So we can slam Pilgrim Wheel Marked by Honor. Yeah.
Is that, or do you slam the mark and wheel?
I don't know. I don't think either of them really works.
Yeah, I think
you'll probably get the other one back, but I think you're more likely to get Marked by Honor back, though.
I'm not even sure that I would first pick both of those cards simultaneously if such a thing were illegal.
That about sums that up. All right. Hydro Surge. No. Nope. Okay, Meteorite. We talked about that a minute ago.
I actually... Meteorite's been very good for me.
Has it? How often do you play it? Or I should say, how often do you not play it?
I have been rarely cutting it, but I think one of the reasons is because I've been really building my decks to have the full spectrum of mana curve. I build like maybe 5 2-drops in a deck that also has like a 7-drop in it.
Okay.
And if you're casting a 7-drop, Meteorite's like better than 18th land. It's pretty sweet there. And just so many things care about being artifacts. In a lot of sets, being an artifact is actually like a detriment because they just die to extra stuff. But in this set, you get like so many perks for having extra artifacts in your deck that Meteorite's pretty sweet for that reason too. And if this is like your source of splash mana, that's pretty cool as well. And it feels like there's always something relevant to kill with 2 toughness, even on turn 5.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Is how often is it killing something that you care about? And in my experience with it, yes, it usually does kill something I care about. Mm-hmm. I like that card too. It's just cool. Gravedigger. Gravedigger.
They don't make 2-for-1s on creatures very often these days, and that's a great one.
Yeah, jumps to the top of my list here.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, Necrogen Scudder.
Oh, there's our competition in black.
The Scud Father.
This
thing is a beater.
Yeah, I mean, I think that card's great. I haven't had a chance to play it yet.
I have.
Yeah, it's really good. How would you put Scudder versus Gravedigger?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I mean, I think generally speaking, I'd probably put Gravedigger slightly better. There are definitely decks where Scudder gets super awkward. I've bounced my opponent's Scudder 3 times or twice, so like played it, bounced it, played it, bounced it, and just basically locked Scudder out of being able to be replayed. Which there's just like that's really awkward. Also, if you're getting ran over and you play your Necrogen Scudder as your 3-drop. And they just have a combat trick and run over it or whatever, like you can fall behind really fast. And there are definitely aggressive decks running around. Where Gravedigger asks relatively little of you, and in the color that Gravedigger's in black, he really seems to always have something to grab back. Like I often think, well, Gravedigger, sometimes you don't have something in the yard yet, and he's not that great or whatever, but it just feels like there's always something hanging out in the graveyard for you to get. So I'd put Gravedigger above Scudder, just generally speaking. But, if you ask me, like, in the 3rd pack or something, I could see Scudder jumping up significantly if my deck wants something along those lines as opposed to a Gravedigger.
Yeah, I think if you were a white-black or a red-black aggressive deck, then taking a Scudder there would be pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
But the Gravedigger is also pretty good in an aggressive deck, and Just a safer pick. First pack.
It's just safer. Yeah. Our rare. You mentioned it a minute ago. It's Burning Anger.
Oh man, Burning Anger is such a blowout.
It is a machine gun.
Yeah, it just is that must answer, and you frequently, if your opponent's tapped out of mana, you just get the first activation for free, without much risk.
Yes.
So even if it kill you from that, it's still a 2 for 2, and you got to kill something, which is usually a pretty good bargain for you. So
yes,
I would put Burning Anger in near bomb status. So I think we're taking it out of the pack.
I am taking Burning Anger. Krenko's Enforcer, Nimbus of the Isles, Gravedigger, Necrogen, Scudder, all get at least my eye for a moment. But the fact is that Burning Anger is tricky. You do have to wait for the correct opening on the right creature, and you got to make sure that you've got everything set up. But once you stick Burning Anger, it's over, man. This card is a big-time finisher, and it's really flexible, too. I've used it to kill my opponent directly, and I've also used it to control the board so that my creatures could kill my opponent. And it's pretty funny. Like the first time you Burning Anger and you watch your opponent just Shatterpaws and then just like dig and try to do anything they can to get out of it. They usually can't. So the downside's pretty low. It's a 5-mana aura. You need a creature on the battlefield. It has to have at least some amount of power, right? Like ideally 3 or above to make it really worth it. But the upside is basically you win the game. And when the upside's you win the game, that justifies that kind of risk.
Yeah, a lot of threats, if your opponent, takes 3 turns to find the answer, they're down some life, but at least their game state is maybe stable. But with Burning Anger, it's like it took them 3 turns to find an answer. 3 of their things are dead, and they don't get those things back.
3 cards down, exactly.
And
then maybe they 2 for 1 you or 2 for 2 to get rid of it. Who knows? Yeah. But I like Burning Anger. I think it's really good.
Yeah, so I put Anger first, Gravedigger 2, Scudder 3, Krenko's Enforcer 4, I guess.
Yeah, I think the way I have it is probably Anger, Gravedigger, and then I have Scudder and Enforcer in like the same. Like I don't know which one's better. I guess Scudder's probably just a bit better, but man, I've died to Enforcer a lot. Like that card is just. It's a great 3-drop for the red deck because it comes down and it's on curve enough to matter. And then like you spend some time blocking and sort of stabilizing your board, and then that Enforcer's there just like, you better draw something because I'm going to start chipping away. And of course it's a great target for Inferno Fist as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that just the presence of a pretty good and very playable aura in the format just makes his type of evasion even better.
Yeah, I like that card a lot. Okay, so what do we want to talk about here, B? We're going to be talking about M15. Now that you've had a chance to really dive in, we're going to get a lot of Brian Wong perspective on what he's found, and we're going to be comparing it about what I found. And I talked to a bunch of my friends at the Pro Tour. A lot of them are professional Magic players and got their opinions on stuff, and I'll be able to apply that and relay it as well.
All right, so I guess the first thing I want to talk about is just kind of what have you been seeing people doing during the draft? What colors seem unpopular? What colors seem popular? What decks have you been facing? What color combinations, etc.? Because there's always like, oh, people like to pair this color with that other specific color, etc. I guess white and red to me seem very overdrafted, at least online in the 8-4s. It's hard to get either of those colors consistently. Like half the time I feel myself like either ending up with a not great package of cards of that color or just getting forced out entirely. Did it feel like that to you doing coverage drafts or the time you play online?
Yeah, those specifically red seems to be the most popular. When I went to the event site and talked to the guys before, kind of what do you make of the format? I like to ask, that kind of question of the guys I know before I go in the booth, just to get an idea. Like I know what I think, but I want to know what they think. And red was unanimously thought of as the best color. Blue, on the other hand, was unanimously, until they actually started playing, thought of as the worst color. But then some of the teams kind of popped up and said, we've actually had good success drafting blue, and we think it's misunderstood, is how they put it.
I agree completely.
Yeah. And so that's interesting because, people tend to get that hive mind thing going pretty quickly, and they're like, red is awesome, blue sucks, kind of was with the original thing going into the PT.
Yeah, and it's not just so much that really good blue cards are going late. I don't think it's the fact that there are a lot of sleepers in blue, a lot of cards that are a lot better than you might think.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think people just had a hard time figuring out like what to pair blue with. Like what do you really want to do with blue? And I think people kind of settled on blue red, which gives you like 2 doses of artifact synergy, which is really good. But also just like nice. It's a deck that plays well aggressively or defensively. It can kind of like take either role very easily, which is how I like to play a lot of times. It's like you can use your lightning strikes, controllingly, or just to get blockers out of the way and bash in, right? Depending on how your draw is or what your opponent's trying to do with that. Yeah, I really like blue red and blue black control has been great for me. I've really enjoyed it. I feel like other people's decks are just all bears, and you can really shut them down with blue black because you have so many things that have 3 toughness, and you just stuff them. Just like you just like it's like you're just like rejecting them at the rim over and over and over as they're trying to attack, and it's just
you're just volleyball spiking them into the stands.
Exactly. just one coral barrier, and they have 4 creatures out, and they stop attacking me, and just like, nope, you're done. It's great. So yeah, blue, black, and blue red have been my go-tos with blue. And what about black? Where do you think black falls in the spectrum?
Black seems to be the most in the middle, from what I've heard. I've been reasonably happy with black myself, and I've been drafting blue black a decent amount, mm-hmm. And I've always felt like black was in the middle. Like I never feel like, oh, I finally put together all the things that black can do. I got there, but I've never felt like, oh, these black cards are just holding my whole deck back. Like they've always felt totally serviceable to me. While being remarkably unexciting. Like they are just sort of there doing their job, and you need them in your deck. But I mean, everything from Typhoid Rats, which does what it's supposed to do, all the way up to Flesh to Dust, which does what it's supposed to do. None of them do it in like an exciting, splashy manner, but they get the job done.
Yeah, and also black is just very deep with commons. Like it's very deep with commons you can play, which I don't think a color like white's very popular, but if you don't get triplicate spirits, like what white commons are really exciting you? Like I don't think any of them. Like not for me anyways.
I mean, like Oresco Swiftclaw is one that people like just for curve filler, and it's not that great. Because it dies to Forge Devil and a bunch of other stuff. God, what else? Kinsbale Skirmisher does not excite me that much. The Pegasus is actually like just creeped up my list further and further.
Yeah, the Pegasus is pretty good. Almost everything good I have to say about white commons is combos well with triplicate spirits. If you don't get any triplicate spirits, mm-hmm. like you're very disappointed playing white. Very disappointed.
The card that's jumped the most for me is Sanctified Charge.
Yeah,
because it doesn't care what cards you have, and them being white though matters in a huge way. Like that first strike that Sanctified Charge gives is a big deal. And we saw Sanctified Charge everywhere in the feature match area at the Pro Tour. Like that card was the game changer for William Huey Jensen, who had kind of a stinker of a draft, to be honest. His seat sucked. Like we watched him draft, and it was like, I don't know what he could have done to make a better deck, and his deck was not very good. I was thinking it's about a 5 out of 10. Mm-hmm. Of course, he 3-0'd with it because he's a friggin' machine, but also because he did end up with 2 Sanctified Charge and was able to leverage those and time those just right so that he could get a win out of a pile, because it doesn't matter, right? Like as long as you have creatures, like your Raise the Alarm tokens become great, and your random like Soul Menders and Selfless Cathars and stuff all of a sudden are like win conditions.
Yeah, I think this Pro Tour helped confirm for me in my mind, but he's the best living Magic player like right now. Like if you ask me today, like who has the best chance of winning the next tournament, I think it's Huey. Like no matter what that tournament is.
Man, so he's like, without going too much in a rabbit hole, I am completely with you on that. He's one of my favorite players to watch. I was rooting for him in the top 8 privately. I can't, of course, root for people on the stream, but his progression from coming back to the game, crushing Star City games, then crushing GPs. And I do mean crushing. He top 8'd 8 of them this season,
insane.
Which is a record, and he beat Owen's record. And now, finally, back to crushing the Pro Tour as well is just unprecedented. I mean, he's done this. You know, this will be his third decade. You know, he was in the late '90s and the 2000s, and now in the 2010s. And also talking with him about limited is fantastic because like he would fit perfectly in this show. Like he definitely takes the same or similar type of approach that you and I do. You know, you're not going to see him going off the deep end with some crazy stupid deck that works 1 out of 5 times or whatever. Like he is a solid drafter who understands the fundamentals very, very, very well.
And no hyperbole with that guy,
nope.
You know?
Nope. That's it. When I ask him for his opinion on something, it's so refreshing. You know, Ben Stark's like that too. Mm-hmm. It's just so like, I don't have to have these arguments about like, oh, well, Ornithopter's good sometimes. Like, they're just like, no, what are you talking about? Like, no, go away. Right. Like they don't want to hear it. And I'm just like, my people, you know, like I finally found you, you know? So, yeah, but yeah, Huey's awesome. But anyway, back to Sanctified Charge. He leveraged that to get wins out of a deck that really had no right, you know, going 3-0 at the Pro Tour in anybody else's hands. And that card's gone up a lot for me.
Yeah, so maybe that's your second best white common.
Yes.
I could feel pretty
because it just makes it so that you can play the crappy white commons and still win.
I mean, I've really found that when I play against a white deck, outside of Triplicate Spirits, that's the card I'm most worried about. I'm always thinking about as soon as they play that 5th land, whenever they attack, I have to be like, well, what blocks do I make so I don't get just annihilated by Sanctified Charge, right? And it's usually like, well, block one thing here, and it's like you can use the charge and kill my one thing and then deal a ton of damage to me, but at least I get to keep some of my creatures alive. But yeah, it definitely warps the game. It's a very powerful card.
For sure.
So green's the last color we haven't touched on yet. I don't think people have figured out what to do with green yet. Like, basically, the only green decks I ever see people drafting against me are Convoke. They just play green, white, Convoke. And if people don't pair green with white, like, they just don't play it at all. I just haven't seen green outside of that combination hardly at all. How about you?
Yeah, so I think the Siege Worm deck is definitely the main focus for people so far. But the problem with green is that it's clunky. It's, like, super, super clunky otherwise because you know, some of the best cards that you can have are like Invasive Species is sort of like this focal point for what green's trying to do, I think, because it gives you this slightly undercosted body, although let's be honest, it's not really. It's just a Centaur Courser, but it does feel that way in M15. And then you're supposed to be able to kind of go off with it, right? The problem is that like the number one targets, which I know that you called out in the set review, you know, was like Shaman of Spring. Mm-hmm. Like, well, that costs 4 mana, right? Yeah. A full 4 mana. Like, I can't tell you how many times that I've had what felt like a good draw, and I'm getting my butt kicked, and I've got 6 or 7 cards in my hand because I played like a Satyr Wayfinder and replaced it with a land, and then I played a Shaman of Spring, Invasive Species, and returned something to my hand, so now I still have a card in my hand. And then I played Shaman of Spring, and I still have a card in my hand. And it's like, I should be getting way ahead, but I just feel like it's so slow that like I just haven't done enough to actually affect the board in a timely fashion. So I have to say I'm kind of with them. Like, I don't know exactly what green is supposed to do outside of that. Now, the two places that I found it to be particularly effective are the one you mentioned paired with white, so that you can do the whole Convoke thing. And the other one is with green-black, which was kind of the breakout draft deck of the Pro Tour, where you abuse the graveyard synergies and that kind of thing. And cards like Restock and Satyr Wayfinder go up a ton in a deck that's looking to do that kind of thing. But that one doesn't pay quite as much attention to some of the other cards that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I found green-black to be a very natural pairing, because black can kind of go either way, but green feels very much on the controlling side in this set. Because like you look at the Premier Commons, and it's like Shaman of Spring, which is not a beatdown card, but a very powerful card. Shaman of Springs, they go late online, like 6th, 7th pick or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's a great card. It's really good. But just people haven't figured out like what to do with it, right? And like you said, like if you're trying to beat down it, it's so clunky. Netcaster Spider, like a very powerful card, but not great in an aggro deck. And I kind of think like Siege Worm. Like Siege Worm kind of wants you to sit back for the first few turns and establish your board, and then tap out to play the huge Siege Worm. Like that's not a great beatdown card either, right?
Right.
So and like yeah, the invasive species, which is really like you want to leverage expensive comes into play abilities because there aren't really that many good cheap ones. Um, so it's like green doesn't have that beatdown theme that it normally does. So I think that's really like eliminated like green red decks. Like you just don't see any green red decks. And also like green blue tempo like doesn't work because green doesn't come out of the gates fast enough.
Yeah, I found green blue to be bad.
Yeah, I think green blue would probably be my pick for just worst, straight up worst color combination.
I think it is too, and that, which is strange to say because we've kind of gotten used to green blue being very good, like all the way back to Return to Ravnica, or not specifically that, but that block.
Yep.
When we got to play Simic, it's been good, and it was good in M14 as well. And yeah, I think we get a little break from Simic because it is not that good here.
Yeah. So you mentioned the graveyard deck, and I've been toying around with that a little bit. The Satyr Wayfinder is obviously like a key card in the graveyard deck.
Very much so, yeah.
But I just found the Satyr Wayfinder just to be really good in general in the set because it's a sweet card to help you cast Convoke things because normally that 1/1 body is like so worthless, but it's actually really helpful,
Yeah.
for convoking. It also gets you the land, so it gives you like basically 2 mana towards casting Siege Worm, which is really good for your one card. Yeah, I've been a huge fan of that, and just like the kind of like losery Undergrowth Scavenger, which is a card that I don't really like that much.
I don't
But
either.
if you just add a couple of Satyr Wayfinders to your deck, that brings it up to like reasonable. And for me, it's been pretty good if I get to that 2 Wayfinder mark. I think then you can play it and it's decent.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen people make 6/6s and 7/7s with that thing, and it's like it's okay. I mean, if you go off, you go off. But apparently, the deck is a thing. Like a bunch of the pros were coming around on it at the Pro Tour, and I know that Andrea Mengucci for his team kind of pioneered it, and apparently they kind of broke it. We saw Ben Friedman on the stream with that deck, and he really liked it. He thought they kind of had something that other teams didn't.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with that deck feels like it kind of starts off slow, but really builds long-term advantage in a way that the other decks can't. And that only works if you can just control the aggro strategies reasonably. And it really feels like the aggro strategies are like predictable enough, and unless they get triplicate spirits or something like that, you can just play a couple of X3s, and then you've completely stoned their attack, and then you can just start building up whatever game plan you have. And that's a super powerful game plan, which is like, dump stuff into my yard, play Undergrowth Scavengers, play the Unmake the Graves or whatever that card is to get 2 things back from the yard, restock. Like, you can do a lot of sweet stuff with the graveyard, and I think you actually do have the time to make it happen, assuming you just play a couple good early blockers.
That was my question. Is I see that. I'm with you. I'm with restocking your bomb back to your hand or unmaking the bomb back to your hand and maybe getting that scavenger guy going. I see the upside, the card advantage, and the big stuff that you can do late. But my fear is just dying. Like, I'm just like, yeah, but if somebody plays Krankos Enforcer, what the hell do I do? Right? Like, I've got all these weird cards like that are trying to grind out the later game, and like both restock and remake the Graves cost 5 mana. Like, those are like sort of big plays that you need to make late in a game that aren't the kind of thing that you can efficiently do, right? And so the question is like, does that color combination green and black have enough early stuff so that you can set that up and actually go deep? One of the ways that Ben was saying when we asked him about it to aid that is that it feels like it feels like the green and black cards are like borderline close enough to keep you alive, but not perhaps, you don't get like the really good stuff. Like you don't get a Coral Barrier or something like that just sort of like blanks out the bottom end, but you get life gain. Like you get to Rot Feast or Maggot back stuff, and
Sure.
you get to like, sort of recoup a lot of that in the later part. And he said that ended up being more important than you'd normally think it is. So I thought that was pretty interesting too.
Netcaster Spider. That's your go-to.
That's my boy.
Yeah, Netcaster Spider in a green-black deck is just probably the best green common you can get. Like it's such a good blocker and will shore up your game against triplicate spirits, but also just like block all the bears in the interim. Like really, really a huge fan of the Netcaster Spider. And if you're trying to go long with your green deck, as you probably should, that should be a really high pick for you. You want to go?
Agree.
You want to go through some cards that have caught our eye and stuff that maybe since the set review we have maybe ratcheted up a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. First one for me, Midnight Guard,
Oh yeah.
and it's just really nice to convoke something and then attack, or convoke something and then block. And it sounds simple, but it's normally so painful to like tap your entire team to convoke something, and like that just gives you the extra blocker you needed to live. And 2/3 is a great spot to be in this format.
I feel like 2/3 is ideal.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, because against the aggro decks, it's a perfectly suitable blocker, and against the decks that aren't trying to aggro you out, it's a reasonable attacker. Like a 2/3 is not something that they can just simply trade off with their 2/1, right? Like they actually have to put a card in front of it, a real card in front of it, or have cast a real card to get in the way. Midnight Guard is kind of like similar to what we were talking about before. It's kind of boring, but really solid, like just super, super solid.
Yeah, exactly. And there's not really a whole lot of ways to leverage like giving him some kind of tap ability. I mean, you could Burning Anger it, but like that's not going to happen that often.
Right.
But yeah, really cool with any kind of convoke. Selfless Cathar has been my favorite one drop. Maybe Mystic Elf. That's up there too.
Elvish Mystic.
That man, it's impossible to keep that
Yeah,
straight.
you're not. It's never going to happen.
Why can't it
And
just
you're
be
really good at names, by the way.
Why can't it just be Llanowar elves?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sad. But yeah, Selfless Cathar, it's great because it stays relevant even as a top deck on turn 10. It's obviously not the best thing you could draw there, but it's just better than the other one drops in that situation.
Yeah, I think that the Selfless Cathar is better in this set than it was previously, and it was already pretty decent previously, but now every single time I see it, I'm like, crap, like that is going to be so annoying, and I already know it. And I just, especially if you're playing red, where now it trades for your burn spells or your guys, and people that are really good at using Selfless Cathar's ability and timing it correctly are, I think, at a pretty good advantage in this set.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so much more incentive to just play a random one drop to help you convoke out faster. And that's just like the best one to put in that slot. And way better than Ornithopter. Way better than Ornithopter for that job. It's not even close.
Yes.
Similarly, Sungrace Pegasus. That
just keeps going up.
Yeah, that's a 2-drop. It's so sweet, though. Like the number of times I've Living Totem down to my Sungrace Pegasus and just made like kind of like a faux vampire Nighthawk. It's like, you got to kill this thing. Inferno Fist on it. Haunted Plate Mail. There's just so many things you can do on it. But even if you don't put anything on your Sungrace Pegasus, it's still really annoying to play against. Like, just love that little guy.
I do too. That is not my kind of card. You know, I prefer the cards with a little more punch than that. But Sungrace Pegasus has held its own every time I've played with or against it, and I'm convinced.
I mean, even if your opponent plays Runeclaw Bear and you play Sungrace Pegasus, like the life swings like even out, right? You're both losing 1 life a turn essentially if they just swing unhindered at each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like so in that, even in that scenario, it's not like less effective than a Runeclaw Bear.
Right.
Warden of the Beyond has been really scary to play against.
Yes.
It feels like my stuff is exiled all the time, and it's like they play a Warden, I'm like, no big deal, and I'm like, wait, something got exiled? What got exiled? How did that happen? You know, and like it feels like there's always something exiled.
And it's sitting over there looking at you like, I've been over here the whole time.
Yeah, it's like really awkward, but you know, stuff just happens. You get Devouring Lighted, or you get Pillared, or Constricting Slivered. It just seems to happen a lot.
Yeah. Rotfeaster Maggoted something separately from that. Yeah, there's just all these random weird ways that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you like build around Warden of the Beyond, but it's just a nice little add-on to whatever type of deck you're playing.
And I've been really impressed by that card.
Yeah, I like it. Triplicate Spirits, it's the best common in the set, right? I think so, or it's close, if not.
What's the competition?
I would say Lightning Strike is up there for me. I don't think anything out of green, nothing out of black. I mean, Flesh to Dust is the best black common, but that's not as good.
No, it's not. Yeah, Triplicate Spirits is way high on the list no matter what. Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, blue has like Frost Links or something like that. I don't think that's there either.
No, it's not as good as Triplicate Spirits.
Yeah, it's Lightning Strike or Triplicate. So I mean, there was a lot of hype on the Spirits coming into the set, but that hype was well warranted. It's a very powerful card.
Yeah, I think the Magic community has finally learned the lesson that anytime you get to make multiple 1/1 flyers from one card, it's really, really good.
Yeah, also, it seems like WotC's philosophy lately is like, make a perfectly reasonable draft set and then ruin it by putting a card in it at common that makes a whole bunch of 1/1 white flyers. Like,
yeah, maybe they haven't figured out how good it is.
yeah, there's like Battle Screech and on Triplicate Spirits. I'm like, can't I just play a normal game of Magic? Like, so I basically, if people just realize you just don't pass them, like hardly ever, then it's fine because people don't get 3 or 4 copies. But like the first couple of days when people are just like, ooh, Triplicate Spirits, to cast my other Triplicate Spirits, you're just like, oh my god, please stop.
Right, unbeatable.
Yeah, the double Spirits draw is like virtually unbeatable. Same with double Battle Screech draw, right? And it's kind of frustrating. But now that I think people are getting the right value, and white is so popular because of, so many people are like first picking the Spirits and trying to back it up, it feels reasonable to me. And just like, as long as they don't go later than like second pick, like it's okay. But such a good common, so good. Any other white cards catch your eye?
White cards.
Soul of Theros. Best card in the set?
Yes, that actually is the consensus among the pros.
Yeah,
that Soul of Theros is the best card in the set.
I feel good for giving it an A+.
Yes, I think I gave it an A.
Card's bananas.
Yeah, that card is. Ugh. If they untap it, the game's over. It's just over. Just done. Game ends.
Yeah, it really is.
No, that's it. What's next?
Blue. So. Amphin Pathmage has been good for me, but I frequently haven't been main decking it, so this is gonna sound kind of weird. So, to be high on Amphin Pathmage, I first had to like go low on it. So like at first it was like very disappointing to me because I was like, spending 4 mana on a 2 toughness thing like kind of stinks, especially because usually blue decks are kind of on the controlling side. But then in a matchup where you are the beatdown, your opponent really wants to block and isn't going to pressure your life total, you sideboard in Amphin Pathmage, and all of a sudden they can't beat you anymore. Like if their game plan is to sit back, maybe they stabilize at 12 life or whatever, then you play Pathmage, and it just completely changes their game plan, and they have to answer it or die. Like you just make 2 things unblockable and attack them for 6 a turn until they're dead. Like it's super good at that job. So as long as you're not asking too much from that card, ask it to be like a 2-way player or like a consistent every game performer. Just in those very specific scenarios, it's like as good as anything.
Yeah, I think that it basically is one of those ask a question cards, right? Yeah. It's like, do you have an answer right now?
Yep.
Answer's no, GG.
Yep.
And it makes you scramble. And you got to respect a card like that. I kind of wish they would have made it like a 3/1.
Make it a little bit worse.
Yeah, I not that it's too good. Like I don't have any complaints that it's like its overall power level's too high, but I think that those type of cards aren't very fun. Like if you're playing a game of Magic and your opponent gets off to a reasonable 2-3 start and you're a little bit behind them, but they've hit you a couple of times with their thing, and then they play that Amphin Pathmage. A lot of times you're looking at your board like, well, I made a Coral Barrier to block, and then I made like another 3-drop or whatever, that's like maybe a Witch's Familiar or something like that, which is totally reasonable, right? Like you kept that hand against somebody that played a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and a 4-drop, and you're probably okay, right? Like you go Coral Barrier into Witch's Familiar, and normally you'd feel like you're okay, but you've taken some damage, you're at 14 or whatever, and then they play this. Mm-hmm. And now it's like you cannot race them. You have 3 power on the board total. And like you said, they make their 2 power guy and their Pathmage unblockable a turn later or 2 turns later, and they just start hitting you with it and ignoring everything else. And what I want is for the person who takes that line to be punished. Sometimes, right? Sometimes it has to get there. And I think this card has the tools to get there. But I also want it to be sometimes that your opponent's like, okay, make this unblockable, and you're like, kill that. Now they've fallen back behind again, right? And I like the fact that there's a lot more risk to it there. Now, there is a decent amount. This isn't like a big complaint or anything. It's 2 toughness. It dies to a lot of stuff. But I kind of want to see it die to even more stuff. I want to make it even more risky to go all in on the Pathmage. Because I've seen people do it, and then the game just ends. It's just like, oh, you don't have anything? Cool. We're done here, right? And I don't love that. I don't love that non-interactivity of that. I don't hate it, but I don't love it.
On the other hand, it does present a decision sometimes where you have to, like, you at some point you make up your mind, okay, I'm just going to start activating Path Mage with all my mana every turn rather than developing my board. And if you do kill it, now all of a sudden I'm falling way behind.
Exactly, and I just wish that killing it was slightly easier.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because it would still trade up for 3 toughness creatures, and maybe it just dies to a few more things in the format.
Yeah, I do like that there are cards to keep control decks in check. Otherwise, you get a format like M14 where it's just...
That's a good point.
The mono blue Elixir of Immortality deck is just like...
Yeah, and that's not a real thing. I mean, obviously it was an M14,
yeah,
but it's not something that should happen very often in Limited, if ever.
Yeah, if something does happen there, that's kind of an issue. So I'm glad you got to have like little checks in the format like that. Coral Barrier. I really
that Squid's my boy.
I love the Squid. I love the 1/3. The 1/3s are so good in this format. Coral Barrier, not Coral Reef, as we've been calling it in the last couple podcasts.
Did we call it Coral Reef?
Yeah, Coral Reef is a card from Homelands that features the text: blue mana, tap target blue creature you control, and remove a polyp counter from Coral Reef to put a +0/+1 counter on any target creature. What on earth kind of card is this?
I don't want to reference that card anymore. We need to...
Yeah, so it's really unfortunate that the name was taken up by that stinker of a card, but Coral Barrier is awesome. It's so good. But it's just like...
I love Coral Barrier.
Yeah, any kind of attack squad that's made up of bears and 2/1s or 1/1s, like, you just play a Coral Barrier and they just can't attack you ever again. It's so good.
I love that card. I think it's great. It's also sweet with Convoke. Like, it's just dumb how many little synergies it has. I mean, I think that, like, going forward, anytime I see one card that makes 2 creatures, I'm just automatically bumping it up on whatever list I have it on. Because it's just like, even a card like Coral Barrier, which gives you like a mediocre blocker and a, you know, kind of a crappy squid token or whatever, just the fact that it gives you 2 bodies is great. And it's just like, every time I've ever played a card that gave me 2 bodies for 1 card, it's been good. So I'm just like going to assume it's good until proven otherwise.
Yeah, the squid is almost always relevant. Whether it's like convoking out like a Will-Forged Golem on turn 4 in the blue-red artifact deck, or just blocking against aggro, or even in a control mirror, because they're frequently playing blue and you just have a 1/1 unblockable. I played against Kenji the other day online, and
like Kenji?
Yeah, Kenji. Mm-hmm. And our board was squid token with encrust versus squid token with encrust.
No way.
We just had to... We couldn't let that squid keep attacking, so like squid was just like, it was like a high priority target for removal in that matchup because we were both playing blue, and you can't sit around forever against a stupid squid.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, Coral Barrier.
Did you beat him?
Oh my god, it was like the worst. I'm not going to recap what happened, but he played a Child of Night on the very last turn when I was setting up. It's like, okay, he can only have 1 blocker here. His only card in his hand, Child of Night. That's basically like 3 blockers because all my stuff had 1.
Oh no!
And I was like, I had set up to be like, okay, what could he possibly have? And like, really, so yeah, that was game 3. He just daggered me with that.
What a
really
jerk!
Rough. I said I wasn't going to recap, and then I just did. So
I wanted you to. I don't know why you said you weren't going to. I was going to make you do it anyway.
Yeah. So basically, home team lost.
Okay, I still like you.
Divination, just real quick. You always speculate how good is it going to be in the format. I think it's pretty good in this format.
Yeah, medium speed format that can do both type of decks. I never cut it. I love Divination.
Yeah, been a huge fan. Military Intelligence. This is one that is kind of unlike anything we've ever seen on a Magic card. It's very unique, but does present a lot of power if it works.
Is it good? I still cannot figure out if it's good. It seems crappy on the surface to me, but like I've heard a couple of people that I respect say that they liked it, and a couple people said they didn't. So I don't know what to think of it, and I haven't played it myself yet.
It's been good for me. I put in about 3 decks so far, and basically I've been putting in my main deck. And if my opponent is a very, very hardcore aggressive deck, I'll take it out just because I would prefer to have just another blocker. But man, against a lot of decks, you just need 1 evasive thing, and then 1 thing they can attack and maybe trade, or even if it's like a squid token, I'll just send my squid in to die to help get me the other half of the combo I need to draw a card. And it's like once you get going with Military Intelligence, it's very hard for them to stop you. it kind of works like a scroll thief or something like that, right? Where it's
Right.
like, oh, bounce your thing, kill your thing, play this on this, now attack. It just makes it really hard for them to stop you. Or it's like you just replace the creature that they killed with another creature. And you get all that for only 2 mana. So, as long as you're in a matchup where you can attack, with some frequency, I think it's pretty good. So
I'm going to try it out. It's on my short list of cards to try out.
I haven't been picking it highly because I haven't had to.
Yeah, you don't have to, that's for sure.
Yeah, so you can get this card 7th, 8th, 9th, or whatever. But it's been pretty good for me.
Okay.
Research Assistant. I think everybody's kind of caught on to this one.
Good
maybe
blocker.
not, because I have been getting that card 14th as well. Primarily, it's a 2-mana 1/3, and that's actually pretty good. Because there are so many bears. Every white ground creature that attacks has 2 power. You can just block all of those. Torch Fiends and Bronze Sables and all these things people are playing. It just blocks them. It's so good. And then when the game goes late, Research Assistant is actually a must kill. You can't just let your opponent Research Assistant 5 times in a row. The looting is so powerful. Someone put Oppressive Raise on my Research Assistant. And I was activating it for 7 mana, and I was very happy to do so. I just really enjoyed it, and you just need to have a couple of 2-drops in your deck, no matter what type of deck you're playing. And in a control deck, I think this is actually a premier 2-drop. Not that you have to spend a high pick on it, but it's actually close to ideal. Been a huge fan of it.
I've been a fan too. It does what it does. It does what it does well, and you're happy to have it. You do have to get over the fact that the looting costs $1 million.
Sure.
But that's just a personal problem, right? If you view the card in a vacuum, it's just upside with the loot, and you really playing it for a 1/3 blocker.
Yeah, I've actually liked it more than Rummaging Goblin, and I kind of don't view them as similar cards at all because I'm primarily playing the assistant as a creature, whereas the Rummaging Goblin is hardly a creature at all. It's a 3-mana 1/1.
It feels almost like an enchantment, yeah.
Exactly. So it just feels that role of early defense while providing power in the late game, and that's what I love any early drop creature that's not a bad draw in the late game. It's just it's so hard to find those, and this is really good one at that. Statue of Denial, I mentioned that I found it to be totally playable just to play one of them. Stormtide Leviathan, this is an 8-drop, so this is always a huge test in the format. Can you play it? I basically stopped passing Stormtide Leviathans. I'll just stop what I'm doing in pack 1 and switch into a Stormtide Leviathan deck because it's won me the game every time I cast it pretty much. It's been so good. And I feel I can...
For me too, especially when I get it for free off of Master Predicaments. Ha 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 ha.
Who never let your opponent cast a greater than 4. Never do that.
Hi, Garth Avery from Wizards of the Coast.
It's just super
It was so good. He was green-red too. Just drowned everything he had. He has no flyers, no way to do anything. I'm a genius.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it's just here's the card that stops everything your opponent's doing and also kills them in 2 turns. So good.
Yes, I like that. I like getting paid off for my 8-drops. I like the fact that I can play that and know that in almost all such scenarios I'm going to be able to fully stabilize the board after playing it, because otherwise you just can't justify it.
Yeah, I've kind of felt Coral Barrier, then Divination, and then I play maybe the 3/3 flyer Nimbus or whatever, and all of a sudden I'm pretty close to getting to Stormtide Leviathan mana, already, and I'm not under that much pressure, and with how focused blue is on defense, you can totally make it happen. Anything else in blue?
Blue, the only thing that really stands out is the military intelligence. I am going to draft that card, and I will report back.
Okay. Yeah, I think you may be pleasantly surprised. Maybe. I'm not sure.
If it works well, I'm going to be very happy.
It's going to be really bad in some games, clearly, but I think it works often enough, even in a game where the fear is always that it's a win more card. And I don't feel like that's the case with military intelligence. I feel like there's a lot of back and forth games where it can be very good.
Okay.
Black. So black, we mentioned earlier, but black is, for me, actually, it's a little bit better than it looks. You kind of look at Flesh to Dust, and you're it's so overcosted. I very happily play that card. I don't know if I would want 4 copies in my deck, but the first 2 Flesh to Dust are really good. Covenant of Blood, doesn't get picked that highly. It doesn't seem like. Maybe you get a 5th, 6th pick. It's been really good for me too.
It's been good for me too, man. the killing something with 4 toughness is a big deal. It kills like this huge extra level of creatures that like Lightning Strike doesn't.
Yeah, and even if you need to tap down a couple of blockers to do it, you get back enough life that, it was kind of like, at worst, like a wash. So I've been really happy with that. And the fact that it just goes to their face in a situation where they stabilize the game. So even if you're playing like a kind of more aggressive deck, you can use that. Like once they get blockers down, finish them off with a couple of Covenants. I've been happy to play even as many as 3, which seems crazy because it's a 7-drop. But with Convoke, it's been totally fine.
Yeah, I play 2 to 3 all the time.
Yeah. Nightfire Giant, second best uncommon, or it's up there, right?
Everybody takes it really highly. All of that Curd Ape cycle are getting kind of annoying because everybody just takes them.
Yeah.
Like they're so good that you can't that people just no matter what will go for them. And I kind of like the attention of like, well, maybe I'll wheel it because nobody is in these 2 colors, but people just move into those 2 colors to play those cards.
And like I said before, like there's such a cool splash where like I've splashed like the red activation of my Nightfire off of like a Shivan Reef and a Meteorite or something like that, right? Where it's like, like I just had like a 5-mana 4/3 that like might just be awesome. You never know. Typhoid Rats, I was a little bit worried about it because, I'm kind of down on 1 toughness stuff in the format, but that's mostly because 1 toughness attackers have a really hard time because they have to go through Raise the Alarms and Squid tokens and Research Assistance and all that stuff. But Typhoid Rats is like primarily a blocker and he doesn't have all those same issues. So it actually kind of does what you want it to do, which is just like be an early consistent blocker. It's been actually totally fine and definitely playable.
Yeah, one thing I really like about Rats is the Unmake the Graves.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that hard to set up a situation where you trade it for a real card, maybe trade off some other random creature, and then get both of them back, and even replay the rat the same turn. And by that time in the game, it's funny because the sequence usually goes like you play an early rat, they play like a 2/1, some creature or whatever, and they're like, I'll attack. And you're like, sure, block. Mm-hmm. And they kind of didn't expect that necessarily because they're just like, well, this is some crappy creature, and the rats is known for being able to trade up. And then they're like, great. And then they play their Rhino or whatever, and then you get to get your rats back, and now they're back in the same spot from before.
Yeah, I think that really is worth mentioning as like a strategy aside. But if you're going to play a card like Unmake the Graves, which is like kind of an expensive card advantage tool, if you have a way to affect the board that same turn in your deck, getting back the Typhoid Rats and playing it, it makes that card so much more palatable because you don't fall behind on tempo like you otherwise would. It's a huge deal. Ulcerate, I've really liked Ulcerate. And just because of the instant speed blowout potential, because people now are just like so used to being able to just like cast their auras or cast their combat tricks or go all in on this thing, and when someone only has 1 mana up, just because 1 mana removal hasn't been good for a long time in Magic, and you just get somebody with Ulcerate, and you can just, it seems like every time like nobody sees it coming, and it's been really good for me.
I've never had one.
Oh, that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, because that card gets picked up pretty early, and it's an uncommon, so you just don't see it, and it seems really good.
Yeah, as it should. Picked very highly. One last black card, which is familiar. It's been a lot better for me than I thought it would be, and just because I think 3 is like a really good spot on toughness in the set.
I'm convinced that I take Witch is Familiar a lot higher than my draft partners because I like it a lot. I just feel like it's always what I want. It's sort of the Netcaster Spider of black. It's like the card I just feel like better about my deck in general once I have it.
Yeah, it's not better than Coral Barrier. It's not better than Netcaster Spider.
No, in fact, it's quite a bit worse than both.
And still very, very playable.
Very playable.
And I'm actually not sad to have it in my deck either, like I thought I might be.
Yeah.
Zathrid Slyblade. Have you had any experience with that yet?
Yes.
Have you had any opinions on it?
Yes. So when we did it in the set review, I was a little down on it. Like I totally thought it was playable, but wasn't really excited about it because I thought that anytime you activated the ability, you were just super opening yourself up to getting blown out. But what I realized is that you're not getting blown out. You're just getting 1-for-1 when you do that. And your opponent has to do some awkward things. And there's not that much cheap instant speed removal in the format. I've come around on it. I like the card. I think it's totally fine. I don't cut it ever for my black decks. It does work. It's sort of like Truth Serum in a lot of ways, because a lot of times they've got their big green Siege Worm and they're just like, go, and they don't have anything, right? Yeah. And you can just get them. And like green white, they have a really hard time with cards like that. Like there's blue, green, and green, white are just sort of like, they're kind of blank to that card. They can interact with it in a couple different ways, but for the most part, it's not dying. And as always, hexproof is deceptively powerful as well. So yeah, I'm up on the Slyblade. I like it.
Yeah, I've had it be okay. I don't think it's like a great card, but it's definitely like, yeah, definitely like, you don't cut it really.
Yeah, it's pulled its weight.
Yeah. So red. Altac Bloodseeker, that little 2/1 that whenever one of your opponent's things dies, it gets +2/+0 on first strike and haste. It's like super scary to play against an Altac Bloodseeker. I'm just like, I just don't want to block, because if they have like the removal from my other creature, I just get 2 for 1. It's like, geez, I just keep taking the damage there. And it's kind of like one way they can get through a squid without like just getting totally like card advantage out of the game, and it's pretty sweet. It might be scarier than it is good, but I don't know. I'm terrified of it all the time.
I am too. I've been able to abuse it a little bit here and there. But I have to say, the times when I was successful with it, my opponent kind of walked into it. I don't know if they didn't know for sure how it worked, or if they're just like, there's no way he has something here. And I'm like, actually, lightning strike this other guy that you played a turn ago and then kill that thing. And I actually did it on back-to-back turns, where he just tried to throw like a 2/3 in front of the Bloodseeker and just got it killed, like first striked out both time while I actively killed whatever else he had played. Mm-hmm. And like, that's pretty tough to come back from that.
Yeah, it is. That's the thing. That's what makes it so scary, is because like you just think like, if this goes badly for me, I just am going to lose the game.
Right. But the downside isn't that bad though, because they can just be like, sure, take 2. Mm-hmm. And maybe 4, yep. But when it's not in combat anymore, it's much less impressive.
Right. Blastfire Bolt. It seems like you get these like super late.
Latest ever.
And I totally get it, because like you don't want to have like 3 or more in your deck, but I think the first 2 Blastfire Bolts, assuming like this is like one of your curve toppers, is not bad. Like it just kills basically everything. Nothing has more than 5 toughness, right? Like
no, nothing within reason, like the souls do or whatever, but you're losing to those.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been pretty happy to play a bolt or 2.
I just play 1.
Yeah.
And I take it pretty low.
Yeah, you don't have to spend a high pick on it, no. But very, very reasonable to play 1. Cone of Flame.
Boom.
It's the best uncommon, I think.
God, I was playing today and just looked at my board as I was developing it, and I had like Welkin turn, 2 toughness, 3 toughness, and I'm just right. My opponent's on 4 mountains, and I'm like, well, here's my Nimbus of the Isles, go, and like I just I just immediately lose the game if he has it on like a robust 3 for 1, right? Like he kills a 2, a 3, and a 5 drop.
Yep.
Now he didn't have it, so I won. But but I'm just like, this is the format. Like if you have Cone of Flame, you win. Interesting. Ben Stark passes Cone of Flame that he opened pack 1, pick 1 at the Pro Tour.
For what?
So he opens Cone of Flame, Siege Dragon, Forge Devil, Triplicate Spirits.
Interesting. I think if you take the cone, the person on your left might just take the Triplicate Spirits.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I don't think that Siege Dragon is as big of a pull as it might seem.
Especially at the Pro Tour, right? Where people aren't necessarily going to be swayed by
and you have Sam Black on your left. I don't know if that matters.
It probably does, but I don't know how.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess mainly the thing you take from that, whether Sam's preferences for draft or not, is that he's Sam Black. Like he knows what the hell he's doing.
Sure. Yep.
I said I would take Cone.
Yeah, I think I would too.
I would too. And Ben caught a little bit of flack for his pick there. I think it's defensible what he did.
Oh, it is for sure.
I just don't think it's correct.
Yeah, I mean, Cone is such a good card, and you never know. What if the person on your left just first picked a white card too? Like, there's like a very reasonable chance that could have happened, and you got yourself into a mess when you thought you were steering clear of one.
Exactly.
Forge Devil, just that little guy, does work. and I think for a lot of the same reason Cone of Flame is so good is there's just a lot of stuff with 1 toughness in the format that's worth killing.
Tons of it. Tons and tons of it. Guy's
Yeah,
awesome. I take him pretty high.
Yeah, and you can use them to convoke and whatever. I mean, I think partly because convoke exists, not necessarily that you're going to convoke with your Forge Devil, but more people are just playing random weenies to use to convoke.
Yes.
That's warped the format in such a way that you can take advantage of them and totally get them with that little thing. It's pretty sweet. Goblin Rabble Master. I wasn't sure how good it was going to be because it's like, well, if they just play like a 2/3, like it just trades with it or something. But man, if you just have any type of trick at all or like any removal at all, you just kill your opponent in a blink of an eye.
I know. It's so nasty because you just feel yourself falling behind that card.
Mm-hmm.
Like once they get 1 token ahead, it's like, oh no. They're slowly ticking ahead, and like then 1 combat trick gets them 2 tokens ahead, and then when they start attacking with the Rabble Master itself, like the game ends pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's sweet. I still don't think it's like bomb status, but I've been very pleasantly surprised by how good it is.
Yeah, card's good.
Scrapyard Mongrel.
Yeah, he's awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah, it is what it is. It's hard to get enough artifacts though.
Yes,
like,
very hard.
But
that's the payoff. Scrapyard Mongrel, the Junkyard Dog is the payoff.
There's a lot of fighting. Any other red cards catch your eye?
Yes.
What do you got?
Borderland Marauder.
Borderland Marauder. It's great, right?
It's great. Like great. Like I think it's better than Altec Bloodseeker. I think it's better than the other red 2-drops. I like it better than Generator Servant.
Yeah.
I just want to play those and turn them sideways, and they're so well positioned because they don't die to the stupid things that kill 1 toughness creatures or other 1 toughness creatures, and they get through like a leftover Coral Barrier or just some 3 toughness thing. And
the research
right
assistant.
Yeah, research assistant, exactly. And they just bash right through it. I just want 1 million of those every time.
Yeah, and you don't get rejected by Witches Familiars or Netcaster Spiders. Yeah, it's definitely the ideal 2-drop. Very, very strong.
Sweet spot. Yep.
Thundering Giant has actually been like okay as a 1-up for me.
He's fine.
Yeah.
Totally
not embarrassing.
Boring but serviceable.
Yeah. So in green, I was down on Elvish Mystic because I was like, well, just other things. There's other things to convoke with. I can just play Soul Mender or something kind of lame and get, maybe 50% of what Elvish Mystic gets me. But the Mystic's good. Like, it's just always good.
How high are you taking Mystic these days?
It's hard to say. I haven't been playing a ton of green because, like most other people, I haven't really figured it out yet. But it's probably one of the better green commons. Like, just because green in the set actually wants to build up a lot of mana and really play a long game that you're not really going to... Like, I think Runeclaw Bear is like not that exciting. So like, there aren't good 2s that make you want to just like skip your whatever you're going to do and do that instead. Like, you really want to get up to 3 and 4 mana as fast as possible. So it's pretty sweet.
I haven't been taking it that highly, but I should probably bump it up a bit.
Yeah. Feral Incarnation.
Nah.
I like it.
I think it's just too expensive still.
I've been Feral Incarnationing like tons of people out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's been one of my best green cards so far. It feels like.
So what is the deck like? Because I know what the card does, and I know what it demands, which is a lot. So what does the deck look like that takes advantage of Feral Incarnation?
Basically, you just stall the game. So Netcaster Spider is obviously like your go-to, but any other color you can pair with green that helps you just control the game. And then you just get 3 things out with 6 lands, and you tap them all, and you play 3/3/3s, and that doesn't really give them any good attacks because you have an army. And next turn, when you untap with everything, you just bash them, and like it's just too many things. Like, they just can't handle. You get 9 power and toughness.
Yeah, it's huge. It's a huge game swinger when you do resolve it. That's for sure.
Yeah, you almost always win when you cast it, and it's really not that hard to cast, especially if you got like stuff like Satyr Wayfinder in your deck, which gives you basically 2 mana towards it. You can build up to it pretty reasonably. So,
all right. So again, the question is, well, where are you picking it up then? Because you don't see it that often, right? It's an uncommon.
Yeah, I haven't seen it that late. I mean, if I'm green, I'm actually taking it very highly. Like, I don't know if it's a great reason to go into green, but if I'm green, like I'm there. Like, I really like it.
Okay, cool. I'll bump that one up for sure. I had that one kind of still sitting in the back on the bench a little bit, so I will change that.
One quick one, Hornet Queen. Yeah, 7 drops.
Yes.
7 drops are totally fine in the format. There's nothing to be worried about. It's an A.
Yep. I that's my A+. I mean, that's the best. That's that gives me everything that I ask out of a bomb. So
Yeah. I mentioned earlier Netcaster Spider. It's like that's a premium green common.
Yes.
It's real sweet. Living Totem has actually been a lot better for me than I thought it would be.
Agree.
And I think the reason for that is because creatures just don't get that big. So turning your 1/1 into a 2/2 actually like makes that 2/2 is like almost always going to be relevant.
Yeah,
or
like
making
you mentioned it before, like with the Pegasus, all of a sudden that's a real card now.
Yep.
2/3 flying lifelink is pretty scary.
Yep, and you just warp the combat math. And I like how it can fit in various parts of your mana curve. And even with multiple living totems in your deck, you don't just get bogged down on 4 mana or whatever like you might otherwise. So it's like you can use it on 4 to make more aggressive. You can use it earlier, and it blocks well. I don't know. I just think it's all around pretty cool.
I like it a lot. I think it's super solid.
Yeah.
I just view it as like a 3-drop with an upside.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I know it's a 4, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think of it the same way. Sado Wayfinder, like I said, really good in the set. Like, there's minor graveyard synergies you can do, but just having that Convoke body to get you the land, like, super consistent. And I love playing a couple of Wayfinders rather than playing an 18th land. And I've been playing 18th land, like, almost every deck. Like, I am 18 land, play first in M15. Like, I'm just all about that.
I also like, I just love Wayfinder when your opponent plays 2/1. They just hate it. Like, they just never want to, they're just like, God, he got his card back. It's like, it's almost like a 2-for-1 in as a card because I don't mean it like by cards. What I mean is it's like such value, right? Because not only do you like almost always get a land back off of it, but it also has keyword crappy. And they just refuse to trade with it.
I know.
It's like, and they had to watch you get your card back off of it anyway. It's like, they'll never trade their 2/1 for that.
Yeah, it's super depressing. You got any more green cards?
No, those are the ones I want to talk about.
Okay, so artifacts, just like Bronze Sable and Gargoyle Sentinel, in this set, being an artifact is good. Like, being an artifact makes you better. It's not a downside at all. Bronze Sable is actually like one of the best 2-drops, which is like so bizarre.
It's so embarrassing, but it's true.
But, it blocks Krenko's Enforcer. It blocks Accursed Spirit, the Intimidate creatures, very effectively. And just powers up your mongrels, and you're just like, man, I'd much rather have Bronze Sable than Torch Fiend. Like, and it's not even close.
Yep.
So I've been there with Bronze Sable. I've been there with Phyrexian Revoker, which I've taken like as high as like 3rd.
Just because it's a Bronze Sable?
Yeah, it's a Bronze Sable that can like randomly like shut down their Sunblade Elf or whatever they might have. Sure. Gargoyle Sentinel, I've been right there with that too. It's not like a great Magic card, but it's an artifact and it's a playable creature, so therefore I like it.
I take it a little higher than most people, by the way.
No,
I actually like it a lot.
It is, and I feel like it does a lot of the same job that like a Witch's Familiar does, but it comes online in the late game and adds a lot of power.
Yes,
it's sweet. Obviously, like Juggernaut, that's a great artifact creature as well.
Which brings me to my next controversial pick. This one is not one that you're going to be able to comment on directly because you need to see the list or the previously picked cards. But Ben Stark, again, he decided to take Juggernaut over Soul of New Phyrexia, Pack 2, Pick 2.
I mean, I could imagine that scenario. It doesn't seem that likely to me.
Right.
But you would have to be like, man, I have way too many 6s already or something like that,
Mm-hmm. How many 6s would you think?
Like
if that was your 4th 6, that's too many, right?
No, I think if I already had 2, I would be leaning strongly towards Juggernaut, assuming I was going to play the other 2.
Okay.
I don't want to play that many,
Yeah, no, 6s are awful.
Yeah.
Unless Soul of New Phyrexia.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If that was your first 6, I think it's definitely a very wrong pick. But if that would be like your 3rd 6, I think I'm on board.
Yeah, this is also his 2nd Juggernaut.
Juggernaut's awesome, though.
Juggernaut's awesome. Like,
I
will play as many of those as I can get my hands on.
Juggernaut's never not been awesome. Juggernaut's just like the timeless beater. Like, always does work. So you want to go through a couple cards that maybe like have been disappointing to you in various ways? For me, in white, Ephemeral Shields, like it's totally fine, but it really just feels like so many of the white creatures are just like so interchangeable. Like you're not really protecting anything that great. It's not like Theros Block, right? Where you're like, okay, I got 2 heroic triggers on this creature, and now I need to protect it with my life. It's like, wow, I protected my Kinsbale Skirmisher. I protected my Sungraze Pegasus. It's like there's just really not anything that important. So you can use it just as a 1-for-1 and it's okay. But in most decks, I just don't think it's that exciting.
Yeah, I think that the times when that card gets good is when you've got a Siege Worm or something, right? When you're pairing it with another color and you've convoked out something big. Now all of a sudden that card looks a lot better because there's definitely a turn in many games where you make a Siege Worm, you attack with the next turn, and your opponent has to hold their breath and triple block the thing, right? Exactly. And it's like, whoops, gotcha. And this is the easiest way to do it.
Right. So so I think the shields are good if you know your deck is going to have a couple of big threats or maybe a couple bombs or whatever. You can do it. But if you're just like in your run of the mill average, play some stuff, normal mana curve, it's just really not that great. All of the Paragons, I think we just went a little too high on our grades with them. Like, if you just kind of consider the average deck has how many other creatures of that color, like 5, 6, 7, maybe like that, that's okay. That's not even necessarily a must play. Like it's playable there, but if you ever go less than that number, like your Paragon is usually pretty bad.
Yeah, it's weird because that's the same vibe I have. I just I don't prioritize them that highly now. But I got to say that we went over some data at the Pro Tour at the news desk, and like the Paragons were in the top uncommons for their colors, like all of them.
I mean,
now the top uncommons list is relatively short. I mean, we were doing the top 5, I should say.
Sure.
But there's not that many uncommons, but still, like they popped up more than I thought they would.
Well, I think part of that is if your deck is if the color you're drafting was open enough that running a Paragon is good for you, then you have a good deck. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Because remember, this is winning decks. So
yeah, exactly. So like, if you were to go like in on that Paragon and it works out, like that's great. But it's just like there's so many like average case scenarios where it's just like merely mediocre or worse.
Yeah, I don't take them that highly.
Yeah, I haven't either. I think the main exception is the white one, which is triplicate spirits or raise the alarms, and all of a sudden you got yourself a stew going. I don't know. That's pretty good. Just like random 6s that I thought like I might be playing every now and then, like Glacial Crasher or Miner's Bane. I just haven't needed to do that ever.
Don't need those. Yeah.
Yeah. I a lot of times I'm looking for just like a high impact card if I need to play a bad card, and something expensive and fat usually does it. I just haven't needed to. Like the format's deep enough that just never felt compelled to.
Same.
Bounce spells, Peel from Reality, Void Snare. I haven't been that excited by them. I think we were kind of spoiled in Theros block where everyone was running so many auras that you could just get your card advantage back. But
we were first picking Voyage's End sometimes.
Happily.
Yeah.
Very happily. And with Voyage's End and with Griptide, because of the scry on Voyage's End and the putting the creature on top with Griptide, you can kind of just get your card advantage back immediately, even without, hitting an aura or something like that. But with Void Snare and Peel, like you have to. It's actually a pretty rare scenario where you actually get that card advantage back, right? So I think you might be able to run like one Peel in your deck, but running multiples is pretty risky because if you just get a hand with multiple Peels and no real way to cash it in, you just fall behind.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually played Void Snare at all.
I haven't played Void Snare either. I think it's bad.
Yeah. But
I've played Peel, and I'm continue to remain high on Peel. Like I think it's good. I've played 2 of them in a deck every time I can, and I basically view Peel as my insurance plan because like sometimes they have Ensoul Artifact and you can't beat it, right? And you need a Peel, or sometimes they go for a soul, right? And they want to activate it or whatever, and you can bounce it and use that as like a huge tempo play that you don't normally have. And sometimes they go for Spectral Ward, and you're dead if it resolves, right? And like, I love to have that backup plan because there's just enough combat tricks and just enough auras floating around that I found that I can get enough of a card back off my Peel, especially when you consider that I'm going to be bouncing like sometimes a Frost Lynx or something like that where I get to recoup my value. I still think Peel's a high pick, and I think it's really good. The good news for me is that other people don't, so I get to pick it up later than I would probably take it normally.
Right. Would you ever play 3?
No.
Okay.
No
so
way.
two is your number.
2 is my maximum, but I do want to. Like I do.
Okay.
Like yeah. The thought of getting stuck with no creatures and multiple Peels though is just it's too much for me.
Yeah. In a similar vein, Inferno Fist, I've frequently been disappointed when I had 3 in my deck. Because a lot of times you just don't. You'll just have situations where it's like, man, I don't have a creature in play, and I can't cast my.
And of course, those are taking creature slots potentially, so it kind of works against itself.
I mean, if you had a deck with like 6 or more 2-drops, you could easily play 3 Inferno Fists. But in a deck with maybe 4 2-drops, it's kind of like a more average case scenario. It's like the 3rd Inferno Fist to me feels a little bit like overkill, and like I'm not gonna. I just think I would pick the 3rd one much lower than I would the first 2.
Okay.
I might still end up with it, but I've been kind of stranded with an Inferno Fist in my hand more often than I would like, and indexed with too many of them.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that because I don't think I've had the opportunity to have 3 Inferno Fist, but I'll keep that in mind if that does pop up for me because I think that before I would have just been like, sweet, more great cards and just keep playing it. But you're right. Like those, the more you have, the more they start infringing upon the slots that the creatures that they're supposed to go on would take. And that matters for sure because that is one way to lose a game of Magic very easily is to have auras in your hand and no creatures. Like you're just dead.
Yeah, it's really rough when it's like, oh, this card's too expensive to cast. This card is not good here, and this card I just don't have a target for. It's like you're just like, oh, there's 3 cards in my hand, and my opponent has some stuff killing me, and I can't do a single thing. It's really rough. So I always try to limit the number of ways I can have those draws because those are ways that I lose games of Magic, right? And I don't like to lose games of Magic.
Agreed.
Nissa's Expedition. I gave it I tried it on a flyer where I was like, okay,
is that card good?
I'm like trying to like ramp up to like maybe Siege Worms or something, and like I have splash mana, and like this is kind of cool. And I would just have it in my opening hand, and just like the entire game would just go by and be like, well, didn't cast it. Like
you never had a window to cast it.
Yeah, where I was like, well, it's just better to cast Living Totem here, or it's just better to cast this other thing here. It's better to now I'm at Siege Worm mana already. Like, oops.
Right.
And then like when the last card in your hand is Nissa's Expedition, you don't get any value out of it at all. It's terrible.
No, it's crappy.
So I was very disappointed with it, and I'm probably not going to play it again unless
that does make sense. So in the set with Convoke, right? Like the whole point is that you can get to these 6 and 7 mana creatures without having to get to 6 and 7 land drops. So
exactly, you can just put another creature in your deck, and it will have like kind of a similar job.
Yeah, I think if I had like a situation where I was splashing like maybe 3 cards, I'd consider that. But yeah,
right. Overwhelm.
Is it good?
There's always like, oh, you look at it, and you're like, oh, is this a new overrun? Because if it's a new overrun, that's a big deal. No one's cast it against me yet, not a single time. How about you?
I've had it cast against me once. I lost. I lost on the spot, but it felt like it was a particularly strong draw for my opponent. Like he played Feral, whatever, Invocation. What is it called? Yeah, and
Feral
then
Incarnation,
and then, and after like way ahead of time, and then the next turn like played a dude and fired that thing off, and I'm like, okay, well, went off, right? Like I don't think that's like an average case scenario for that card.
No, and would you have lost that game anyways? Maybe?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so in that case, it's really not that relevant at all.
No, it's not.
The last one I have is Obelisk of Erd, where like I mean I haven't picked it highly at all, and I think people kind of figure out it's not a great card. But every now and then I'm like, well, it's a rare. I can always sell it, so I'm just gonna take a flyer on it here rather than a card I'm not gonna play in my main deck anyways. And then I get to like deck building, and I'm looking at my creature types, and it's just like they're just like all over the place, and it's like I don't even. It's like Pegasus, and then like human wizard.
Yes.
And cat warrior.
Yeah, or cat cleric or something, and you're like, hey, there's no overlap here.
Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, my guys are all fighters. Cat warrior, Kithkin soldier. What the? Hippogriff. Like I can't do this. I'm really trying. There's like a sliver and a giant monk. Like the creature types are like all over the place, even in the same color, right? It's just impossible.
No, it doesn't work. We had 2 of them in in one of our coverage drafts floating around, and the same person ended up with both. I think it was Rashad, and it was like, well, what should I name? And I'm like, well, let me see your deck. And it's just like, we found, I think Soldier was the thing we decided, but it was 3 or 4. It was like, you just can't play these at all. He's like, oh, okay. Yeah. He didn't take them high or anything, but like, there was no good overlap there.
Yeah, you look Salamander Wizard, Squid Horror, Vidalcan Artificer, Elemental Cat, Angel Illusion. It's like all these things have 2 types.
Those are all real too.
Yeah, they don't sync up one iota. It's just brutal.
I think you just name spirit and have multiple triplicate spirits and go off with that.
And somehow you needed that to win. You win.
It's your 2-card combo, yeah, that you needed to win when you had multiple triplicate spirits, because that wasn't strong enough.
Yeah, it really comes down to creature tokens, like raise the alarms and triplicates, I guess. I think that's really the only way to make it happen.
And I think soldiers are the only viable thing. Because the tokens are soldiers, just soldiers, and then a few of the creatures are too.
Yeah, so it's... You kind of just think like, oh, I'm playing all the same color. It's going to work, and it just doesn't.
Nope, it sure doesn't.
A little bit disappointing to me.
Talk to me real quick before we go. Speed of the format.
Oh, you can play 7s and 8s.
That's what I need to know.
Yeah, assuming you're making your deck kind of support it, but running a couple of draw spells, running some Satyr Wayfinders or something like that. Just a couple ways, a Meteorite, just ways to keep it going a little bit. I found that the aggro deck's predictable enough that if I just put enough X3s in my deck, I can just block them and get to my high drops and feel good about it.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. I'm pretty happy to hear that too. That's been my experience as well, but I still feel like we're in the earlier stages. Like I'm getting more comfortable, but the set feels a little disheveled to me. Like I don't, when I open up a pack, I'll usually come to a conclusion, but it's not obvious to me yet. And I don't know if it's going to get obvious to me because there just don't really seem to be any decks in this format. There's like a couple of, I guess there's one, like the Convoke deck. But besides that, I just don't really feel like I have like a really clear path on any of this stuff. It makes me feel weird. I'm just kind of like, I'm just picking cards because this is the best card in the pack, but I'm not really thinking about my deck as much because there's just not a lot of synergies there. Yeah,
I guess I should mention, so far, I mean, in drafts, I played 11 8/4s, and I made the finals of 8 of them. And I haven't done
8 out of 11.
That's pretty good. I'm like
insane.
up like a million packs, but I basically haven't gone all in on anything. I haven't been like super focused on Graveyard, super focused on Convoke, super focused on artifacts. I'm really just like taking good cards, having a sound mana curve. Trying to make sure I can interact with my opponent, whether they're playing aggressive or control, just like try to just be like sound fundamental Magic, and just like see my opponents doing like crazy stuff and just beating them.
Yeah,
so
it's
just
they're
like
trying to do cute stuff or whatever.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like as formats go on, to jump back to the speed of the format a little bit, I think the formats tend to get a little bit faster as they mature because people figure out how to make the aggro strategies work a little bit better. Once they get more experience with it. And people will be like, okay, I'm going to stop trying to do this cutesy thing that's not very effective that was giving my opponent lots of time, right? So it's like, okay, maybe 8 drops and 7 drops won't be quite as good in a month from now as they are now, as people figure out, oh, it's not really good to play this Obelisk of Erd deck, or it's not really good to play, all in Convoke or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not sure if those are true or not, but, as those kind of weak strategies weed themselves out, you don't have as much like easy pickings, decks that you can just crush with your bombs.
Okay. Do you like it? Are you enjoying the format?
I am so far.
I mean, you're also winning a lot.
That doesn't hurt.
That's awesome though. 8 out of 11 finals is nuts. Okay, well, why don't we wrap this thing up, B? I think that I have a better, like I actually learned a lot from your perspectives here too, and also solidifies a lot of the things that I've been hearing as well, and I love that. I can't wait to. I'm actually just going to go draft right now. So if you guys want to send us an email for feedback, it's lr@lrcast.com. If you'd like to follow Brian or I on Twitter, Brian or me on Twitter, my name is Marshall_LR, and Brian's is Brian_LR. The clan. Messaging isn't working on my client for some reason. I don't know if it's me or if it's everybody, but people, I can see when they send me a message and I cannot see the message or answer them. It's getting a little frustrating because I know that they're asking for clan invites in there sometimes and I can't answer. So I'm not going to say how to do that for this one until that gets fixed, just because I don't want to, lead people down a path that doesn't actually get them where they want to go. If you guys, for everything though, limited resources, of course, it's lrcast.com, and the onefor1.com is where you can find the other podcasts we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. So, as always, thanks for hanging out with us for a few hours of your week, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, you. There's a new mascot in town, and he goes by the name of Rocky. That's me, straight out of Ivan's Flock. 300 pounds of sheer ramming speed and a sweet perm. I'm the baddest thing on 4 hooves. Oh, hi, Elmer. I thought you were on the lam.
Baddest thing on four hooves? Buck up and fight me, Rocky. Or do you have the heart? That's what I thought, hightailing it as usual. Just when things were about to get fun. 12 points for effort, but LR only has room for one mascot. Oh, Shelly, I didn't see you there.
Come on, Elmer, don't be so shellfish.